With the global series between the Sharks and the Predators kicking off the 2023 NHL season, I'm continuing my predictions for each of the division standings, and in this video we will be talking about the Central Division. If you missed my previous video on the Pacific Division, a link to that will be at the end of this video. And if you enjoy this video, I would appreciate a like and a subscribe. Let's get started. Starting off with last place in the division, I have the Blackhawks. This should not be a surprise to anybody. It's pretty obvious that the Chicago Blackhawks are trying to get the #1 overall pick this season. They had some good young talent that they could have used to build their team going into the future. But during the trade deadline, they traded Brendan Hagel to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And during the offseason, they traded Kirby Dach to the Montreal Canadiens and Alex DeBrincat to the Ottawa Senators. And they also didn't extend a qualifying offer to Dominik Kubalik, who signed with the Detroit Red Wings. Max Domi and Andreas Athanasiou both signed for one-year deals, and it's hard to see them not getting traded by the deadline. And I think Patrick Kane might also get traded at the deadline since he's on the last year of his deal. I don't need to spend more time on this team. The Blackhawks are bad. We all know this. Let's move on. At number 7, I have the Arizona Coyotes. Apart from a few minor differences such as having Zach Kassian and Troy Stecher, this team is basically the same as they were last year. And just like last year, this year's team is not going to be very good. The reason I don't have them last in the Central is because I think the Chicago Blackhawks are just that bad. And also because I expect Jakob Chychrun to have a bounce-back season, which will make the Coyotes a better team. But the Coyotes are still going to be really bad, and they're going to be in contention for the #1 overall pick. Just like with the Blackhawks, I don't really have much to say about this team. I don't think they're going to be the worst team in the Central, which I guess is progress, but they're still going to be pretty bad. For me, the Winnipeg Jets are going to come in at number 6 in the Central. On paper, the Jets look to have a pretty good team. Kyle Connor will definitely score at least 50 goals this season after ending last season with 47. And then they still have players like Mark Scheifele, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Blake Wheeler, Nikolai Ehlers. And with Hellebuyck in net and Cole Perfetti getting the opportunity to play some top 6 minutes, this looks like a pretty good team. And with Rick Bowness now being the head coach, this team could play very differently than they did last year. Blake Wheeler getting stripped of his captaincy does raise a few questions for me as to how that will affect the team internally and what that locker room is like. I expect that Connor Hellebuyck will have a better season this year than he did last year, which will also help the team improve as well, even with Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele refusing to play defense. Now, I don't think that this is a bad team, but the reason I have them this low in the Central is because I think every other team is just better than they are. At most, I can see them getting number 5 in the Central and getting ahead of the Dallas Stars, but when it comes to the top 4 spots, I don't think Winnipeg stands a chance. Again, it's not that I think this team is bad, it's just that I think every other team is better. I know I spoiled it a few seconds ago, but at number 5, I have the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars had a pretty quiet offseason apart from the signing of Mason Marchment. The Stars had 2 main objectives during the offseason, re-signing Jason Robertson and re-signing Jake Ottinger. Both of those deals did eventually get done, but a lot later than the Stars probably would have liked. Jake Ottinger played really well for Dallas last season, especially in the playoffs. And Jason Robertson is also coming off of a career year, as is Roope Hintz. I expect that all 3 of these players are going to make improvements in the upcoming season. Now, they did lose John Klingberg in free agency, and the play of Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn is not at the level the Stars would want it to be. Perhaps the signing of Mason Marchment makes it so that they don't have to rely on those 2 players as much. I feel that this team has the talent to be in the wildcard race for a majority of the season. Getting into the top 4, at number 4, I have the Minnesota Wild. Due to their cap troubles, the Minnesota Wild were forced to trade Kevin Fiala as they couldn't afford to re-sign him. They also traded Cam Talbot to the Senators and committed to having Marc-Andre Fleury as their starting goalie for the next 2 seasons. And apart from that, the Minnesota Wild didn't really do anything else in the offseason other than re-signing Jake Middleton. Obviously, losing Kevin Fiala, who was over a point per game in all 82 games played, definitely hurts. And not doing anything in the offseason to help that, it also hurts as well. Then again, given their cap troubles, what options do they really have? I mean, that's what got them into the mess to where they had to trade Kevin Fiala in the first place. Matt Boldy was a real surprise for this team last season, and I expect him to take a jump and for him to be in the Calder conversation this year. And from what I've heard, Marco Rossi has been really good in the preseason. Those two, with the players they still have on their roster, such as Hartman, Zuccarello, Eriksson Ek, and of course Kaprizov, they could make up for the loss of Kevin Fiala and still be a top 3 team in the division. But I still have questions as to whether or not Marc-Andre Fleury can be a competent starting goalie at the age of 37, turning 38 this season. Since being traded to Minnesota, Fleury has played pretty well, but at his age, can he be the full-time starter of this team? And if he can't, can Philip Gustafsson be good enough to make up for it? This is still a really good team, and I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up being top 3 in the division. But for me personally, I see them taking a bit of a step back this season. It isn't necessarily a bad thing, as they can let Matt Boldy, Marco Rossi progress, Kirill Kaprizov to get better, and can become one of the top teams in the Central again pretty soon. Coming in at number 3, I have the Nashville Predators. While this is being recorded after the 2 Global Series games, I promise that those 2 games did not influence me placing them this high. This year, the Nashville Predators had a pretty good offseason. Not only were they able to keep Philip Forsberg, they were also able to sign Nino Niederreiter, who will be a solid addition to their top 6, and they also strengthened their defense by trading for Ryan McDonough. And of course they have UC Saros. The biggest question for this team is whether or not Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson can play like they did last season. While I can't definitively say if Matt Duchene will have another 40-goal season, it's hard to imagine him going back to the way he played the first 2 years he was in Nashville. And playing with Nino Niederreiter could help increase Ryan Johansson's point total through assists. You also of course have Roman Josi on the team, and I expect Tanner Jeannot to take a jump as well. I believe the Nashville Predators have the talent to avoid the wild card and be a top 3 team in this division. At number 2, I have the St. Louis Blues. During the offseason, the St. Louis Blues were able to come to an agreement on contract extensions for both Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas. They also traded Ville Husso to the Detroit Red Wings and lost David Perron in free agency, also to the Detroit Red Wings. With Ville Husso gone, it does leave a bit of a question mark when it comes to their goaltending. Jordan Binnington had a real down season, putting up a .901 save percentage and a 3.13 goals against average in 37 games, and lost the starting spot to Ville Husso. The Blues are gonna have to rely on Jordan Binnington to have a bounce back season, especially with a 36-year-old Thomas Greiss as the backup. To me, the St. Louis Blues have one of the deepest rosters in the NHL. Last season, they had 9 players who scored at least 20 goals. Vladimir Tarasenko, Pavel Buchnevich, Jordan Kyrou, David Perron, Ivan Barbashev, Braden Chen, Brandon Saad, Ryan O'Reilly, and Robert Thomas. And Justin Falk not too far behind with 16. 3 of their 12 forwards had at least 20 goals. While they did lose one of those guys in David Perron, the St. Louis Blues still have one of the deepest rosters in the league. No matter which line is out, there's always going to be one player the opposing team has to worry about. And I feel like this will continue to be a big part of their success this year as it was last year. And depending on how big of a bounce back Jordan Binnington has, I wouldn't be surprised if this team ends up at number 1 in the Central. I don't believe it personally, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen. And at number 1, it's the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Colorado Avalanche. Now the Avalanche did lose some key players during the offseason. Nazem Kadri going to the Flames, Andrei Burakovsky going to the Kraken, and Darcy Kuemper going to the Washington Capitals. With Kadri and Burakovsky gone, the Avalanche are gonna need to rely on guys such as JT Compher, Logan O'Connor, and Alex Newhook to step up. And their goaltending tandem went from Kuemper and Francouz to Francouz and Georgiev. But given how good the defense on this team is, the goaltenders don't really need to be elite for the team to be successful. And with guys like McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog, and Makar still on the team, even with their offseason losses, it's hard to imagine this team not being one of the top teams in the division. I can see them potentially slipping to number 2, but personally, I still think they're the best team in the division. And those are my Central Division predictions for the 2023 season. If you've watched up to this point, I would really appreciate it if you were to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And in the comments, let me know how wrong you think I am and what you believe the division standings will be like. Thank you for watching.